We're pleased to welcome now Professor Christopher Green. He is an assistant director at the Chase Center for Civics, Culture, and Society at The Ohio State University. Professor, always good to see you, sir. Thanks for coming on.
Good to see you.
So the Supreme Court's been pretty busy, as is normal, I believe, for this time of year, and the big ruling that is getting a lot of attention concerns the Trump administration's plan to really dissolve the Federal Department of Education. First, explain to us, why did the Supreme Court have to get involved in this? Can a president, as the commander-in-chief, just for an agency that's under their purview, can they just not shut it down, let everybody go? Why do you got to have Supreme Court involved?
Yeah, so no, basically the president has these statutes, and he has said basically, hey, Secretary Linda McMahon, I want you. So you have a bunch of discretion. These statutes, they have massive amounts of discretion, but that discretion does have limits. So basically, what the president told her to do was pursuant to my long-term goal of getting the federal government out of this business entirely, I want you to come as close as you can to shutting down the department within existing statutory discretion. He acknowledged, at least in a theoretical matter, that like literally shutting it down would require a statute. Okay. But essentially, he's not allowed to literally say, we've got a statute saying there has to be a thing. There's not going to be a thing. This was what got James II into such trouble in 1688 or 1685 to 88. His whole reign, he was saying, well, Parliament can pass a statute, but I can just suspend it. And we said, in basically the take care clause, the president has a duty to take care that the laws be faithfully executed. And essentially, so the majority did not explain themselves about why they're, for now, at least allowing this to go forward. The dissent, so there were a number of people who thought, like, man, the majority should explain themselves at greater length. I would think, are pretty likely to explain themselves at greater length, but they want to do that in a posture where they've had enough time to really explain themselves. The dissent says, well, we've seen enough. This is a pretext. This is nonsense that we're gonna call out the president on his nonsense. This notion that you're doing, coming as close to shutting it down as you can, but not actually violating the statutes that say it's got to exist. That's just malarkey. So the majority, again, it's just sort of imagining what would the rationale be for why this would be legal. There's a bunch of other rationales why these particular plaintiffs might not really be the right position to sue. But, why would this be legal? One, rationale is we really, really heavily presuppose that the president is doing literally what he says, which is using existing discretion to the extent he can to make the federal role in education be as small as they can make it, but not literally to violate the statutes. The dissent says, well, the only reason to be doing this is if ultimately he wanted to. He clearly wishes the statutes don't exist, but it's not illegal to want changes in legislation. Actually, the Constitution itself says the president can recommend changes in legislation. The president is not allowed to repeal statutes. That's again a longstanding principle, but really it's the fault of these statutes giving the president so much discretion. Congress has got to do its job if it wants to literally, be able to read the U.S. code and then see what's actually going to happen and have those match. Well, Congress has got to do its job a lot better than it has.
So I just wonder, Professor, when the department was created, I believe through an act that was signed into law by Jimmy Carter in 1980. But it flowed through the normal lawmaking process. It wasn't created with the stroke of a pen, an executive order by then President Jimmy Carter. So if it's created with an act, can then the president dissolve it unilaterally or with just executive power? Would it not have to be, I guess, torn down with legislation?
Yeah, I mean that's so, and I think the president has technically acknowledged that it would have to, but there's all kinds of questions about reduction in force and staffing, and when do you fill jobs that have come open? They say, well, just we've got more important things to do than to fill those positions right now. So you always have this competing priorities rationale that you can bring in, and there's a question about, at what point are the courts entitled or required to kind of call BS on that and say, no, it's not a competing priority. You just don't like this federal function. You think it's illegitimate. There's a line somebody said about Bill Bennett. He was Secretary of Ed under Reagan. Said he takes an illegitimate function of government and makes it interesting. So Linda McMahon taking something that maybe the president and she doesn't want to be a federal department, and during its it's not in its death throes, because the president again is not the person who's allowed to kill it. Congress is allowed to kill it. And but in its final, she's like, this is its final mission, which, the dissent from the Supreme Court is taking that very seriously, saying like, oh my goodness, you can't possibly allow this person to kind of suggest that she's going to violate these statutes that require her department to exist. But it depends on how much of a thumb on the scale in terms of presuming good faith and saying like, no, she didn't say she's going to violate the statute. She just sort of gave that vibe. So interpretation from the courts is they have different levels of enthusiasm for it.
She's a bit of an anomaly, I think it's fair to say, because she holds a very high-ranking position in government. She's a cabinet secretary, yet she's fully on board and embraces the idea of essentially diminishing, if you will, if not fully shutting down the agency over which she presides. If you don't see that,
the swamp folks. I mean, the people in these agencies. When you put in a boss who says like, I think we should be smaller. Oh my word! People get so upset. So you might remember Mike Wallace, nominee for the Fifth Circuit. And he was in charge of Legal Services Corporation in the 80s. And he actually came to Congress and said, well, I think you should give us less money. Oh, my word, did he make enemies. And Ted Kennedy actually got a chance to give some questioning when Mike was before the Senate Judiciary Committee. And the notion of some of these folks that you might actually put people in charge who think that the DC world should be doing less. I mean, the way that Ted Kennedy his mind was boggled at that very notion. I found it quite entertaining. Some people will find it more depressing, but this is one of the things we got to have people who know the importance of sometimes working themselves out of a job and thinking like, what I mostly want to do is set myself up so that people always have to be coming back to me to hire me to do more stuff. That's just not a good attitude, not a healthy attitude for the future of our republic. We need people willing to work themselves out of a job, and moving education responsibilities to states and localities. Maybe with a federal subsidy, maybe with a federal worries about inequality, 14th Amendment enforcement stuff. Maybe a relatively thin role like that, but there's just massive federal subsidization of the whole higher ed world. It's got problems, and it has not been a great dynamic. And again, I hope Congress will do its job and come up with straightforward rules that we won't have to worry about who's exercising the discretion that exists under them.
Yeah. Mississippi Secretary of State Michael Watson is listening to us. I believe he's in Washington, or certainly was yesterday. Attended a meeting where Secretary McMahon said, it would ultimately take a congressional act, if you will, to shut the department down. So that makes sense. But, they could cut it and change duties and transfer responsibilities. And one example he cited was this new private voucher scholarship program that's in the reconciliation bill is going to be managed by the Department of Treasury and not the Department of Education. So that's a way to circumvent it. We got a break. If you can hang around, Professor, we can continue talking about some other stuff on the boards.
Sure, that'd be great.
All right, we got Professor Christopher Green. We're coming right back in the Element Wealth days. We're visiting with Professor Christopher Green from the Ohio State University. So the Supreme Court at this point, Professor, it seems like there's a bit of dissension among the ranks of the left-leaning justices concerning one of their cohorts there. What do you think about this?
Well, I mean, I like having dissents. I think it's funny. You sometimes teaching con law, you'll go back and you'll find a unanimous opinion, and it'll have to get revised a few years later. And sometimes scholars will say the explanation is, well, the reason it was written a little more sloppily than it might otherwise have been written is because it didn't have a dissent to push up against. So I've sort of thought, so there's actually a European Court of Human Rights. They have this court that makes these decisions, and it's like 30 judges on it. And when you do that, you really get a lot of views expressed. So you get a wider range of what gets discussed. I think there's a lot of value in having back and forth and refining. I'm always a fan of more discussion, response to counter arguments. So like Justice Scalia, Justice Stevens, they would love to have these dueling footnotes back and forth. Some folks like Justice Rehnquist, Chief Justice Rehnquist, Justice Kennedy, they would just like, no, I've got my little work of art of the majority opinion and I've got my votes for it, so I'm just not going to respond. I like to see more dissent. I like to see more discussion and counter argument, even if the dissent is kind of wacky, maybe especially if the dissent is a little wacky. I want to say, like, well, what are the wacky people? What's the strongest argument that somebody could make for this kind of position? And I find it fascinating. I mean, I think the fact that they're pushing toward the take care clause, the fact that they're really giving it serious attention is a very good thing. The fact that that is the argument they're pushing, I hope it'll, maybe make people look a little bit closely at the late Stewart troubles with administration and think, well, what could we do to have a better rule of law than having all this massive discretion that, you can just, it invites pretextual use, I think. I've been, so some of the cases, there was one case, the big Nolan delegation case, I was pretty disappointed that there wasn't more hostility to executive discretion on the part of these folks on the left on the court, given that they are saying things like this in the case this week. But anytime people articulate, a position, that gives you the opportunity to look at it carefully and say, is this really consistent with what you were saying a week ago? And on the other side, why are you so in love with the use of discretion when it's, goring an ox that you like to get gored, but you weren't upset a month ago? And it, just the process of forcing judges to articulate reasons and being able to go over carefully and see whether they're consistent, I think it's great. Some of the dissent stuff where they really look like they're playing to the media. I look at this and I think, oh my goodness, I do not want televisions. I do not want this to become a visual medium as well, because I think I really believe in the Neil Postman's critique of television that it's amusing ourselves to death. This wouldn't quite be amusing ourselves to death. This would be kind of, exciting the body politic for clicks to death. That's another way that the Republic can die, is when we just lose our ability to focus for extended periods of time because we're emoting all the time. So getting entertainment too much of the time, getting just mad at each other and, kind of accusing each other of bad faith. As a contact sport, if you think the other side has bad faith, it's okay to articulate that, but you don't like to see it descend into kind of the equivalent of a food fight. But in general, I love seeing dissent. I imagine if I were on one of these courts, I'd be dissenting all the time, saying like, well, what we really ought to be doing is this wacky other stuff. Give me your best argument against it, and saying that 17 times until they actually feel compelled to respond. I imagine that's what I'd be doing. So I love to see disagreement. That's really what we do as people training future lawyers, future citizens, is teach them how to disagree and really think carefully, how to learn from counter arguments in ways that don't require you to lunk people over the head.
Yeah, that makes sense. So this legislation, the reconciliation bill, the big beautiful bill as it is branded, has a number of reforms to very popular programs, the SNAP program, the Medicaid program. And so it should come as no surprise that there are attorneys general from numerous states, blue states in particular, that appear to be mounting lawsuits against the Trump administration shortly after the bill became law here.
Unsurprising.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, is this what we can expect, I guess? We pass laws in Congress, our president signs them, and then I guess there are folks that don't care for some of those reforms and provisions in law, and they say, okay, we're going to sue. I mean, it just seems like we're in this continuous mode of that.
Yeah. I mean, anytime you're making changes, there's going to be a question whether you're making the changes in good faith or in bad faith. So back in 2012, we had this Enfiv versus Sebelius case.
Yeah.
And the Medicaid part of that holding said, hey, you're not allowed to just threaten to just completely dismantle Medicaid for the purpose of getting people on board with this expansion of Medicaid.
Yes.
If you're really doing this in good faith, you have to offer the old system. I imagine that a lot of the argument, I think they're going to be really going carefully over these changes and making if they can, making an Enfiv versus Sebelius type argument. The legislative drafters, and as they're writing the legislation, they have to keep these arguments in mind. And they have to be thinking like, are we just doing this for leverage, or are we doing this for a legitimate purpose? And the temptation to do stuff just for the purpose of leverage is always there. Prosecutors charge stuff just for leverage. People pass, why did you take away my timber subsidies or my oil subsidies or my coal subsidies? Well, because you didn't get on board. And if you look at the names of the 51, the states of the 51 that passed, or the 50 plus the vice president that you needed, you'll notice there aren't any coal states. And that's why it happened. Like, is that okay? Well, there is a reasonable argument that the duty to promote the interest of all the citizens in the union, promote the interest of all the states, spending money in the general welfare, there's a pretty strong argument that there is some kind of principle expressed there that you can second guess these kind of log rolling, legislative nonsense that we've gotten, ever since the 1820s, probably earlier than that. But you once you massively expand the electorate, people get legislation passed because they're just giving people stuff that they want to pay for at below market rates, and you get it overconsumed. And it's a dynamic that we've been. I wouldn't say it's perfectly well understood, but pretty well understood. Basically, what's going on? There's a line, bribing the people with their own money. And when you get that dynamic going, and I mean, goodness knows, in the state where we've lauded the appropriators as we have in Mississippi, we know how that dynamic works, and it's not a great game. Again, I mean, my buddy was saying it's like the DH rule. You might not like the rule, but if you have the rule, and your pitcher is not your one of your best hitters, you're going to put in a DH. Okay, you're not going to hit your pitcher just because you don't like the rule. So in the system we've got, you got to play the game. But again, long-term health of the republic, or even like medium term, like what is our situation going to look like in 2050, 2100? Getting really devolving more responsibilities to the states, so you don't have the stakes being so high at the federal level, where the president, the presidential election should matter a lot less than they do. They are extraordinarily important. There's no question about it. But I would love it if we could, if it didn't matter so much, and we could have genuinely an administrator we hire the person who's just like the best person at moving the X's and O's around, and we hash out what we're going to do as a country at the federal level in Congress, and you get more compromise. But that's it seems it's a distant. It's I don't think a pipe dream, but it's pretty distant on the horizon. It's going to be a long walk. We're going to need to persevere for a couple generations before we get there.
Well, we got to go, but I just leave this final thought with you: is that it seems like we've really sort of distorted and contorted and stretched the original principle of those not explicit in the Constitution, powers not explicit in the Constitution, should be delegated to states. Seems like we've stretched that an awful lot over the decades.
Oh, yeah, but, absolutely.
Appreciate it, Professor. Always enjoy the conversation. Thanks a lot.
Good to see you. God bless you.
You bet. We're coming right back in the Element Wealth studio.